Welcome to Almost Alone. Tonight's episode is different from most of the stories we share here. The people you're about to hear from were never chased, never attacked, never kidnapped. They were never in immediate danger. But they lived alongside it for years. They sat at dinner tables with it. They laughed with it. They trusted it completely. This episode is called The People We Thought We Knew, and it's about something that might be more terrifying than a stranger in the dark. The realization that someone you loved, someone you trusted, someone who was part of your everyday life, was capable of unimaginable things. Both of tonight's narrators are adults now, looking back on childhoods that seemed normal at the time. Safe, happy even, but there was something else happening, something they couldn't see, something that everyone missed. And when the truth finally came out, it shattered everything they thought they understood about their own lives. These stories aren't about surviving an attack. They're about surviving the knowledge that you were close, very close, to someone who hurt people, and the questions that come after that knowledge. Why didn't I see it? What did I miss? And the one that haunts them both. Why wasn't it me? If you find value in these stories, please consider subscribing. It helps others find the channel. Let's begin. I'm 29 now. My uncle was arrested 8 years ago. He pled guilty to 7 counts of first-degree murder, and he's suspected of at least 5 more. When I tell people this, they usually ask the same question. Did you know? Did you suspect anything? The answer is no, not even a little. Uncle Jim was my dad's younger brother. Growing up, he was at every family gathering, birthdays, Thanksgivings, graduations. He was the fun uncle, the one who brought gifts for no reason, who remembered what toys you liked, who always had time to play. He drove an old conversion van with captain's chairs in the back and a small TV mounted to the ceiling. When I was little, riding in that van felt like the coolest thing in the world. He never married, never had kids of his own. My mom used to say it was because he was married to his work. He did something with computers, freelance IT consulting, the kind of job that let him set his own hours. He volunteered with the church youth group. He coached Little League for a few seasons. Everyone loved him. I spent so much time at his house. He lived about 20 minutes away, in a modest ranch-style home on a quiet street. My cousins and I would have sleepovers there. Nothing unusual, just the normal kind of thing kids do. We'd watch movies, play video games, eat too much junk food. He had a pool table in the garage and a big backyard where we'd run around until it got dark. He was also the family photographer. Every holiday, every birthday party, every school event, Uncle Jim was there with his camera. Digital cameras had just become affordable when I was growing up, and he was an early adopter. He had expensive equipment, multiple lenses, a whole setup. He'd take hundreds of photos at every gathering and then send them to everyone a few days later, neatly organized in albums. My parents have boxes full of printed copies of those photos. I used to love looking through them. I don't anymore. There were things about him that seemed a little odd, but nothing that registered as wrong. Not at the time. He had a home office that was always locked. He said it was because he kept expensive computer equipment in there. Servers, backup drives, client files with confidential information. He made it very clear that it was off limits. We accepted that without question. He worked from home. Privacy made sense. He also had a police scanner in his van. He said it was a hobby, that he found it interesting to listen to emergency calls. We thought it was quirky, harmless. He would sometimes disappear for a few days at a time. Work trips, he said, clients in other states. Freelance IT work was unpredictable like that. My dad never questioned it, and he loved driving us places. If a parent was running late for pickup after school or practice, Uncle Jim would volunteer. He'd show up in that van, smiling, saying he was happy to help. and our parents were grateful. He was family. He was trustworthy. I remember one time when I was maybe 12, I slept over at his house with my two cousins, his nieces like me. It was summer. We stayed up late watching movies, and eventually everyone went to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night. I don't know what woke me. No sound, no movement, just that feeling you get sometimes when you know you're not alone. I opened my eyes, and he was standing in the doorway of the guest room, just standing there, not moving. The hallway light was on behind him, so I couldn't see his face clearly, just his silhouette framed in the doorway. I sat up a little and asked if something was wrong. He said he thought he heard a noise and wanted to make sure we were okay. I said we were fine, and he nodded and walked away. I went back to sleep. I didn't think about it again for years, but I think about it constantly now. I was 21 when I got the call. I was in my senior year of college, living in an apartment 3 hours away from home. My mom called me on a Tuesday morning, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. Her voice was shaking. She said, "Jim's been arrested." At first, I didn't understand. Arrested for what? A DUI? Some kind of financial thing? She took a long breath. "They're saying he killed people." The rest of that conversation is a blur. I remember her crying. I remember her saying the words, multiple victims and over a decade, and they found evidence. I drove home that afternoon. The details came out slowly at first, then all at once. Police had connected him to the disappearance of a young woman in a neighboring state. She'd gone missing 6 years earlier, and her remains had been found in a wooded area a few months before his arrest. DNA evidence linked him to the scene. Once they had him, the case exploded. They searched his house. They seized his computers and hard drives, dozens of them, all heavily encrypted. It took forensic specialists weeks to break through the encryption. What they found was worse than anyone imagined. Thousands of digital photographs. Some were normal family photos, the kind he'd been taking for years. But others were different. Photos of women he didn't know, taken in public places, parking lots, grocery stores, gas stations, taken from a distance, like he was following them. Some of the women in those photos were later identified as his victims. They also found files containing scanned images of items that belonged to women who had been reported missing over the span of 15 years. Jewelry, clothing, driver's licenses. He'd photographed everything before disposing of it, and they found his documents, detailed spreadsheets, text files, organized by date, location, and personal details. Observations about people, schedules, routines. He documented where women went, what time they left work, whether they lived alone. Everything was meticulously organized, encrypted, backed up across multiple drives. He'd been hunting for a long time. The work trips weren't work trips. They were carefully planned excursions to other states, where he'd identify victims, follow them, and wait for the right moment. The police scanner in his van wasn't a hobby. It was so he could monitor law enforcement activity and avoid areas with heavy patrol. The locked office wasn't just for work equipment. It was where he stored everything, where he cataloged his crimes, where he reviewed his documentation. He killed at least 7 women, maybe more. The investigation is still ongoing. After his arrest, my family fell apart. My dad stopped talking to almost everyone. He couldn't reconcile the brother he'd known his entire life with the person the evidence showed Jim to be. My aunts and uncles were devastated. Some of them refused to believe it at first. They thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming. And then there were the photos of us. The police found thousands of digital photos of me, my cousins, and other kids in the family. Photos from birthday parties, holidays, sleepovers. Photos we knew about, but also photos we didn't. Photos taken through windows. Photos of us sleeping. Photos of us changing clothes, taken from angles that suggested he'd positioned cameras in places he shouldn't have been. Metadata from the files showed some had been taken with hidden cameras, wireless devices he'd placed around his house, triggered by motion sensors. A detective contacted me about 6 months after the arrest. He asked if I'd be willing to come in and answer some questions. I said yes. He showed me a photo on his laptop. It was me, maybe 13 years old, standing in Uncle Jim's backyard. I was wearing a swimsuit. I remembered that day. It was summer, and a bunch of us had gone swimming. The detective asked if I remembered who took the photo. I said Uncle Jim probably did. He was always taking pictures. The detective nodded. Then he opened another file. Same day, same swimsuit. But this one was taken from inside the house, through the sliding glass door, a close-up, zoomed in. I hadn't known he'd taken that one. The detective said they found hundreds of photos like that. Close-ups, angles that seemed focused. He asked if Uncle Jim had ever made me uncomfortable. I said no, and that was the truth. Nothing inappropriate ever happened to me. He never touched me, never said anything strange, never made me feel unsafe. But I was being documented, studied, cataloged. The detective said they believed I wasn't targeted because I didn't fit a specific profile. Jim's victims were all women in their late teens and early 20s, brunette, petite, living alone or in vulnerable situations. I was family. I was visible. I was surrounded by people who would notice if something happened. I wasn't what he was looking for, but he still watched me. I went to the sentencing hearing. I don't know why. Part of me needed to see him, to understand. He pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. He showed no emotion during the hearing. He sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, hands folded, staring straight ahead. When the judge read the sentence, life without the possibility of parole, he didn't react. I watched him the whole time. At one point, he turned his head slightly and our eyes met. He smiled, not a big smile, just a small, almost imperceptible lift at the corner of his mouth, like we were sharing a private joke. I looked away. I don't talk to most of my extended family anymore. My cousins, the ones I spent so many weekends with at Uncle Jim's house, don't speak to me. I think we all remind each other too much of what happened, of the time we lost, of the innocence we can't get back. Some of them were also documented in those files, some even more extensively than me. None of us can face each other without remembering that we were all there, all watched, all cataloged. It's easier to just not. I can't look at childhood photos anymore. My parents still have albums full of pictures Jim took. I've asked them to put them away, but I don't think they have. I think my mom still looks at them sometimes, trying to figure out what she missed. I think about that night when I woke up and he was standing in the doorway. I think about how I asked if something was wrong, and he said he heard a noise. The house was silent. There was no noise. So why was he really there? What was he thinking? What was he deciding? I'll never know, and I think that's the part that haunts me the most. I wasn't hurt. I was never in immediate danger. But I was close. I was so close. And I have to live with the knowledge that someone I loved, someone I trusted completely, was capable of things I still can't fully process. I carry a question with me every day. Why wasn't it me? What made me different? Was it just circumstances, visibility, the fact that I was family? Or was there something about me, something he saw, that made him decide I wasn't worth the risk? I don't know if that makes me lucky, or if it just means I wasn't what he wanted. I'm 34 now. 6 years ago, the man who lived 3 houses down from my childhood home was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder for hire. He's currently serving 4 consecutive life sentences. I was never in danger from him. I was never a target, but I knew him. My whole family knew him. We trusted him completely. And for years, I have to live with the knowledge that while he was helping my dad fix our lawnmower or bringing over extra tomatoes from his garden, he was also killing people for money. His name was Dennis Garrett, but everyone called him Mr. Garrett. He moved into our neighborhood when I was about 9 years old. He bought the house at the end of Maple Court, a modest two-story with a big backyard and a detached garage he converted into a workshop. He was in his late 40s then, maybe early 50s. Ex-military, he said. Retired early due to a knee injury. He had a pension and did odd jobs around the neighborhood to keep busy. He was the kind of neighbor everyone wanted. If you needed help moving furniture, Mr. Garrett was there. If your car wouldn't start, he'd come over with jumper cables and a toolbox. If you were out of town, he'd water your plants and bring in your mail. He was quiet, polite, and helpful. He didn't talk much about his personal life. No wife, no kids. He said he'd been married once, a long time ago, but it didn't work out. My dad liked him. They'd stand in the driveway on Saturday afternoons, talking about sports and home improvement projects, while my dad worked on his car. Mr. Garrett always seemed to know exactly what tool you needed, or what part to order. I remember he had this really organized workshop. Everything had a place. Pegboards on the walls with tools hung in perfect rows, labeled storage bins, a workbench that was always clean. He let me hang out in there sometimes while he worked. He'd be fixing a lamp or sharpening someone's lawnmower blades, and I'd sit on a stool and watch. He didn't mind the company. He'd explain what he was doing in this calm, patient way. Measure twice, cut once, he'd say. Take your time. Do it right the first time. He seemed like the most normal person in the world. When I was 14, my bike got stolen from our front yard. I was upset. It was a nice bike, my birthday present from that year. My dad filed a police report, but we didn't expect to see it again. 3 days later, Mr. Garrett showed up at our door with my bike. He said he'd been driving through a neighborhood about 2 miles away and saw it leaning against a fence. He recognized it and brought it home. My parents were so grateful. My dad tried to give him money for the gas and the trouble. Mr. Garrett refused. We look out for each other, he said. That's what neighbors do. I think about that a lot now. How he just happened to be driving through that neighborhood. How he just happened to spot my bike. How he brought it back like it was nothing. At the time, we thought he was a hero. Now I wonder what he was really doing in that part of town. The neighborhood had a tradition. Every 4th of July, we'd have a block party. Mr. Garrett always came. He'd bring a cooler full of sodas and a folding chair, and he'd sit at the edge of the group, watching the kids run around with sparklers. He didn't talk much at these gatherings. He'd smile and nod when people spoke to him, but he mostly just observed. I remember one year, I was maybe 16. I sat down next to him while everyone else was setting up fireworks. We talked for a while about nothing important, school, summer plans, whether I was thinking about college. Then he asked me what I wanted to do with my life. I said I wasn't sure. Maybe something with computers. He nodded. That's smart. Stable. Good money. Then he looked at me for a long moment, like he was deciding whether to say something. Whatever you do, he said, make sure it's something you can live with. Some people think they can separate who they are from what they do, but it doesn't work like that. What you do becomes who you are. At the time, I thought it was just generic life advice. Now I think he was talking about himself. Mr. Garrett lived on our street for almost 20 years. In all that time, he rarely had visitors. Maybe a handful of times over the years, I'd see an unfamiliar car in his driveway, someone picking up a repair job or dropping off equipment. But no friends stopping by for dinner, no family coming for holidays, no girlfriend or partner that anyone ever saw. He kept to himself, helped when asked, stayed quiet the rest of the time. My parents used to say he was lonely. that it was sad he didn't have anyone. I don't think he was lonely. I think he was careful. I was 28 when I got the call from my mom. I was living in a different state by then, working in IT for a tech company. I hadn't been back to the old neighborhood in a couple of years. My mom's voice was shaking. "Have you seen the news?" I hadn't. She told me to look up Dennis Garrett's name. I pulled up a news article on my phone. The headline said, "Local man arrested in connection with multiple contract killings." I read it 3 times before it sank in. Mr. Garrett had been arrested. The FBI had been investigating him for months. They'd connected him to at least 4 murders across 3 states, spanning a period of 12 years. He was a contract killer, someone you hired when you wanted someone dead, and he'd been doing it the entire time he lived on our street. The details came out slowly over the following weeks. The break in the case came from a completely unrelated arrest. A man in Pennsylvania was picked up for conspiracy to commit murder. He'd tried to hire someone to kill his business partner. During interrogation, he gave up names, trying to cut a deal. One of those names was Dennis Garrett. From there, the FBI started building a case. They got a warrant for his phone records, his bank accounts, his digital footprint. It took months, but they eventually had enough to arrest him. When they searched his property, they brought in forensic teams, cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, the full treatment. That's when they found the hidden room. Behind the pegboard of tools in his workshop, there was a false wall. Forensic analysts noticed that the garage's interior dimensions didn't match the exterior measurements. They tore into the drywall and found it. A small room, soundproofed, climate-controlled. Inside they found firearms, multiple handguns, rifles, and a disassembled sniper rifle. Silencers, fake IDs, passports, driver's licenses, social security cards, all with his photo, all with different names. Cash, over $200,000 in small bills, bundled and labeled by date. Files, detailed notes on targets, photos, addresses, schedules, habits, and a ledger. A handwritten accounting book documenting every job he'd taken since 1997. Dates, locations, amounts paid, methods used. According to FBI documents made public during the trial, the ledger contained entries for at least 16 contracted killings. They could only prosecute him for 4, the ones with enough corroborating evidence to bring to trial. The rest were either too old, too clean, or occurred in jurisdictions that couldn't build a case. 4 of the murders he was charged with had been committed during the years he lived on our street. The FBI agent who worked the case did a press conference. He said Mr. Garrett was methodical, patient, and extremely disciplined, that he never took unnecessary risks, that he planned every job down to the minute. He said Garrett lived a double life with remarkable compartmentalization, that he could kill someone on a Tuesday and help a neighbor fix their fence on Wednesday without showing any sign of stress or guilt. One of the victims was a woman in Ohio. She was shot in her driveway as she got home from work on July 2nd, 2011. No witnesses, no evidence. The case went cold. 2 days later, Mr. Garrett was at our 4th of July block party, drinking a Coke and watching kids light sparklers. An FBI agent contacted me a few weeks after the arrest. He wanted to know if I'd ever seen anything suspicious, if Mr. Garrett had ever said or done anything that seemed off. I said no, because that was the truth. He was just normal, maybe quiet, maybe a little too private, but nothing that made me think he was dangerous. The agent nodded. He said most of Garrett's neighbors had said the same thing. Then he asked if I'd ever been inside Garrett's workshop. I said yes, a bunch of times when I was younger. The agent asked what I remembered about it. I described the pegboards, the tools, the workbench. how everything was so organized. He pulled out a photo. It was the hidden room behind the false wall. "Did you ever see this?" I said no. I had no idea it was there. He nodded. "You were probably 10 feet away from it, multiple times." The trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: the ledger, the firearms, phone records showing communication with the man from Pennsylvania who'd given Garrett's name to investigators, financial records showing deposits that corresponded with dates in the ledger. Mr. Garrett pled not guilty. His defense was that he was being framed, that someone had planted the evidence, that the FBI had the wrong man. The jury didn't buy it. He was convicted on all counts. 4 life sentences to be served consecutively. At the sentencing, the judge asked if he had anything to say. Mr. Garrett stood. He looked at the families of his victims sitting in the courtroom, and he said, "I didn't kill those people. You have the wrong man." He said it with the same calm, patient tone he used to use when he was explaining how to fix a lawnmower, like he was just stating a fact. I went back to the old neighborhood about a year after the trial. My parents still lived there. Garrett's house had been seized as a criminal asset and eventually sold at auction. A young couple with a baby had bought it. They were renovating the garage, turning it into a playroom. I walked past it and felt sick. My mom said the neighborhood had been quiet since the arrest, that people didn't really talk about it, that everyone just wanted to move on. But she also said she couldn't stop thinking about all the times Garrett had been in our house. The time he helped install a ceiling fan, the time he fixed our garbage disposal, the time he came over to borrow a wrench and stayed for a beer. He sat at our kitchen table, my mom said. He ate my cookies. And the whole time he was... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I think about Mr. Garrett sometimes. I think about the 4th of July block parties and how he'd sit there watching all of us with that calm expression. I think about the advice he gave me when I was 16. What you do becomes who you are. I think about my stolen bike, how he just happened to find it. And I think about the hidden room in his workshop, the room I walked past dozens of times without knowing it was there. He killed people for money, and then he came home, parked his truck in the driveway, and waved to the neighbors. He helped fix things. He brought extra vegetables from his garden. He made small talk about the weather. He lived among us for 20 years, and none of us knew. I wasn't in danger. I was never a target, but I was close. Close enough to sit in his workshop while he sharpened blades. Close enough to talk to him about my future while he decided whether to say something true about his past. Close enough to walk past a hidden room full of weapons and fake identities and blood money and never have a clue. I carry a question I can't answer. When he was sitting at our 4th of July party, watching the fireworks, what was he thinking about? Was he just a neighbor enjoying a summer evening? Or was he thinking about the job he'd just finished? The person he'd just killed? Was he compartmentalizing? Or was he already planning the next one? I'll never know, and maybe that's the worst part. He looked like everyone else. He acted like everyone else. And for 20 years, we never suspected a thing. 2 people, 2 childhoods, 2 people they trusted completely. Both narrators survived. Survival isn't the same as being unharmed. They carry the weight of proximity, of being close to something terrible and not knowing it, of looking back at their own memories and seeing them differently now. The truth is, predators don't announce themselves. They don't look like monsters. They look like family, like mentors, like people who care. They earn trust over time. They build access. They learn who's vulnerable and who isn't. And they're patient. If tonight's episode affected you, or if you've had your own experience with someone you trusted who turned out to be something else, know that you're not alone. If you'd like to share your story, you can submit it through the link in the description. Thank you for listening to Almost Alone. Stay aware, stay safe, and remember, you never really know anyone completely.